Hi folks, this is Karim Rao from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Red Alert Labs, the video number 116. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have finished discussing the documentation, which is called CIS Critical Security Controls version 8, which is a documentation that states and discuss how we can protect ourselves against cybersecurity attacks. This documentation was provided by Center for Internet Security Organization, which is a non-profitable organization seeking to publish documentations and recommendations concerning securing different operating systems and different applications and different networks. So we have discussed the last point in this documentation, which was called penetration testing. We need to have a system to test our vulnerabilities by making a penetration test. So a penetration test is, in simple or in short terms, you need to discover a vulnerability using a vulnerability system or software to scan through this vulnerability system or software, scan for a vulnerability, and then to hire someone or to hire an ethical hacker to take advantage of this vulnerability and to test and see what the hacker will reach by using this vulnerability. Okay, this is shortly what we mean by penetration test. I have forgot to say the previous video, or I was misunderstand what was external penetration test and internal penetration test. So I have said before in the previous video that you need to hire professional people or qualified people from outside your organization to make penetration tests, or to have some employees within your environment or within your network or within your organization that have some penetration skills to test your network. Okay, this maybe it's a little bit, or this is maybe this is correct, but here is saying that internal penetration test and external penetration test means that you need to make a penetration test from outside your network and from inside your network. Not, or I think it doesn't mean that you need to make internal penetration test, an internal penetration test from employee within your organization, or external penetration test from employee outside your organization or third party. I think he means here internal penetration test means to penetrate your network from inside your organization, and external penetration test to try to penetrate your network from outside. Okay, so this I think was what he mean. Okay, today we will discuss a very important documentation provided by the Department of Defense of the United States, which states how you can protect Windows Firewall, or what are the best configuration for the Windows Firewall. Okay, this is a documentation provided by the Department of Defense of the United States. So we have said before that it's the best practice to disable Windows Firewall on servers and to activate it on workstations and on laptops. Okay, so why we need to disable it on servers? Because there is a lot of problems that appear when the Windows Firewall is enabled on servers. Okay, for example, I have seen a couple of problems appear when you are activating the firewall on the domain controller. Some workstations was not able to join the domain when the Windows Firewall on the domain controller is enabled. So we need to disable the Windows Firewall on most of our servers. Does this mean that our firewalls are not protected? No. We have another best practice not to let servers communicate with the internet, or to make your servers communicate internally and not to reach the internet. Okay, this is another practice. Okay, not to let your servers get to the internet. So only two servers are allowed to get to the internet, maybe your WSOS or Windows Server Update Service and your antivirus server. Okay, this server that is responsible for pushing antivirus updates to your network and to your servers and workstations. So again, best practice is to disable Windows Firewall And as I said before, this doesn't mean that the server is not protected, because we have disabled internet on the servers, and there is also a hardware firewall that is the first line of defense, okay, that will protect your servers. But you need to have the Windows firewall enabled on the workstations and on the laptops, okay. So this is this is best practice, as I said before. So let's see what are the recommendations of the Department of Defense concerning the Windows Server Firewall, or Windows Firewall in general. The Windows Firewall, by the way, it is installed by default, or it is included with the Windows operating system. This includes Windows servers and Windows workstations, okay. So the first recommendation is to enable Windows Firewall on the domain profile. So if we have a look on the Windows Firewall, we will see that it has a special setting that apply to 3 locations. First of all, the setting for the domain, the setting for the private networks, the setting for the public networks. So the Windows Firewall has special setting, or a group of settings that will be applied to certain locations. First will be applied within a domain or in a work environment, and then some setting will be applied to a private network, or this be maybe your home DSL network or your home network, okay. And public networks, these when you are sitting in a cafe and they are using public networks that are not secure enough, so there are special setting for the Windows Firewall for these kind of networks, okay. So these are the 3 profiles, or the 3 groups of settings that will be applied using the Windows Firewall. So we are have a great concern on the settings concerning the domain, because we are inside the domain. But here the Department of Defense says that you need to apply all of the Windows Firewall setting for all of the 3 locations, okay. So he has a recommendation to enable all of these setting on the 3 locations, or the 3 profiles: domain profile, public profile, and private profile. So let's see here. The first thing is seeing that you need to enable Windows Firewall on the domain profile. So let's see how we can enable it. Okay, this is simply, you can go to the control panel and then open the firewall and then turn off firewall, okay. Then you can enable the firewall here by enabling from here, and you have the domain. This is for a single workstation, but if you are in a network, then this will be done using a group policy. So let's see how we can do this. We can do this from computer configuration, Windows Defender Firewall Advanced Security Setting, and then click on it, and here we can see that we can go to the properties. But let me see first here how we can get it from there. He's saying to open Windows Settings Security, Windows Firewall Advanced Setting, Windows Firewall Properties. Here we can go from this one, okay. And then here we can see that firewall state, okay. Let's see, here are the domain profile, the private profile, the public profile. So here we can see that we can enable state. Here it's not configured, so you can tell him to enable, okay, it's on, okay. So you can enable domain profile from here, make it on, and for the private to make it on, and the public to make it on. So this is very simple how to can enable the domain profile on the Windows Firewall. So this is the first setting. We can do it from the group policy, we can do it from the control panel, or we can issue a command. Okay, we can see here that we can go to the command prompt, tell him state or start, then run, then type cmd and press enter, and then we can issue this command: net sh adv firewall set domain profile state on. This is equivalent to doing this, going to the group policy and Windows Defender profile or Windows Defender firewall setting, and then go there and make it on, okay. Or this is also equivalent for going to the control panel. Just a moment, go to the control panel and then open the Windows Defender firewall and then turn off and on. The same, you can do it from here, you can do it from the group policy, you can do it from the command prompt. So this is the first recommendation, to enable the Windows Firewall on the domain profile. This is the first thing. The second thing is to do it on the private network, okay. So we can enable it on the domain profile enable it on the private, private profile. So in short, he tells you just to enable the firewall on the domain profile, private profile, public profile. So enable the Windows Firewall on all of these profiles. Okay, so this is number 1, number 2, and number 3. So and actually there is also another thing. You can enable the firewall setting not from the GUI and not from the group policy and not from the command prompt, but this also can be done from the registry. So let's see here if we go there and take this profile setting. Just a moment. So we go to System, Current Control Set, Services. Let me go to there, System, okay, and then Current Control. Let me see here how we can get it from the setting, from local machine, System, Current Control Set, okay, then Services, okay. I think here from service provider, maybe. Let's see here, current, then we go to services. Let's go there. Where is services here? Services. Okay, I think this is a problem here. Let's go there, and there control. Let's just wait for a moment, guys. Let me have a look. Just a moment. So to reach this registry key, we can basically copy the location and then paste it here. Just a moment. Right click and then Control V, and then do this. Just a moment. No, System, and then we can make this slash and then press enter. So here we can see that from here we can enable the firewall. Okay, so we can enable the firewall on the public profile, and you can enable it also here from the domain profile, the same firewall rules. Okay, so this is yes, can here domain profile, the same enable firewall, or public profile, enable the firewall, or even the private. So we can see all of the three. Let's wait for a moment here. So this is the domain profile. We have the domain profile and public profile, and even the private we can see it from here. Okay, so I don't know why it's not available here. Okay, I think it's not here, the private, but anyway, so we can enable it from the registry as well. So we have to enable the firewall on the three profiles, and then here he's saying that we need to block inbound connections on the domain profile. So he's saying here that any connections that are received by the host, okay, which is called inbound connections, so or any connections that are received by the host should be disabled by default or blocked by default. This is called inbound connections. Anyway, this is not a practical setting, because in a domain there is a lot of connections. We need the host to accept it. For example, maybe we have a file share connection, so this should be approved by the host, or should be accepted by the host, or there is a remote connection. If I'm trying to connect a remote connection to the host, so the firewall should allow me to connect remotely to a host, and the firewall should allow me to share and to access, or to let the host access a shared folder on the file server. So this is not a practical setting to do. Okay, but I will tell you all that we need to allow some exceptions on the firewall, or to make some exceptions for the firewall to accept some inbound connection. Okay, but if we need to play with the inbound connections, or the connections that will be approved by the host and by the firewall, then we need to go to Windows Firewall properties, the same. So for example, we go to the domain profile properties, and then we go to default profile, and then inbound connections. We should here say to block by default, but this is not a recommended setting. I will show you all, for example, what kind of connections and things that the firewall should allow. For example, in my default domain profile, let me show you all something here. If I open, for example, here, let me go and show you my default domain policy. Here I have some, or I have configured some firewall setting to be applied by the default domain policy, and in this default domain policy I am saying that some inbound connections should be enabled by default on all of my workstations and my servers, or the firewall should accept certain ports and certain services to bypass it. For example, let me show you here. For example, get to the red alert and then get to the inventory and my Active Directory and then my GPO and the default domain policy. Just wait for a moment. So if we go there, let me go to the section concerning the firewall. So let's go further and see here. Okay, this is not it. This is okay. So this is the Windows Firewall Advanced Security setting, okay, and the inbound rules. Okay, by the way, you can configure the inbound rules from here, okay, so you can do this, okay, and you can configure it here from here as well, so you can configure inbound rules from here or from there. Anyway, so if we go to see the group policy here, for example, in the Windows Firewall Advanced Security setting, here I am opening, for example, Windows Management Instrument. So this is a port or a service that is used to remotely configure some hosts. So I am here allowing the firewall to bypass the Windows Management Instrumentation protocol or connection. So here I am is saying inbound rule to allow asynchronized WMI traffic for remote Windows Management Instrument. So here we can see that this is a service. I am telling the firewall to allow inbound connections or received connections from this protocol. Maybe I'm using a remote connection, so this protocol will help me to remotely connect to a machine. Okay, so I am here allowing the WMI to be bypassed, the firewall, especially the inbound connections. Okay, another thing, WNMI instrument, the same. I think this is the same protocol, but the first one is for TCP or for remote, and this is for remote management. And for example, we can see that all of these things, again, Windows Management Instrument, okay, instrumentation, the same. All of these are allowed. The file and print sharing, if I need to allow the host to connect to shared folders, okay, and also this is used for printers, sharing printers and files. So we can see this, okay, file and print sharing. Echo, if I need to ping, okay, I need the firewall to accept the ping request. If I'm trying to ping a host to know if it is online or not, then the firewall should allow ping request. Okay, we can see here also file and print sharing, all of these are rules that or are things that the firewall should allow as an inbound connection. This can be applied to servers and workstations. So okay, these are all services we can see here. File and print sharing, okay, remote schedule task. If you need to configure a remote task on a host, then the remote schedule task service should be allowed to bypass, or the protocol of the remote schedule task to or the RPC protocol to be allowed to bypass the firewall. So remote schedule task, again, remote desktop shadow, remote desktop user mode, again, remote service management, used also to connect remotely. We can see here that all of these services are focusing on remote administration of workstations and servers. So this should be allowed as an inbound connection through the firewall, the Windows Firewall, on all servers and workstations. Okay, so now we can see remote service management. So these are some exceptions. Okay, so you need to configure. If you go to this again, sorry, if you go to this recommendation, so we will not block all of inbound connections. We can have some exceptions, and I have shown you all some exceptions for inbound connections. Remote desktop services should be allowed. Windows management instrument should be allowed. All of these things, and he's saying here that that should be done also on the private profile and the public profile. So this should be done on the domain profile, the private profile, and the public profile in the Windows Firewall. Let's see the other recommendation. Windows Firewall must allow outbound connections unless rule explicitly blocks the connection when connected to domain. So he's saying inbound connections to the host are blocked by default, and we have said that we can have some exceptions. As for outbound, all of outbound connections are allowed. So how we can do this? Simply, we can go again to the Windows Firewall domain profile. So we can go there again, go to the Defender setting, and then go to outbound connections, allow. This is the default one. For the private also to allow, and the public to allow. Okay, so these are some setting, and this can be done through the GUI or through the control panel, or from the host itself, or from the command prompt. So this is outbound for the domain profile. And again, the next recommendation is to have a log size. So the Windows Firewall will record all of what happens in it in a log. So we need to have or to control the size of the log. Okay, let's see here. We can do this. We can do this also from the group policy, or from the registry, or from the setting itself. Let's see how we can do this. We can go to the GPO, and then Windows Defender, and then I think we can do this. Just wait for a moment. For logging, customize. Here we can see that we can configure it. You say here that you need to configure it. Let's go there, or let's see how you do this. You say that you need to go to domain profile, logging, select customize size limit, and says to 16 megabyte or higher. So let's go there. So we need to make this one, and here we need to configure it. And okay, let's see here, configure it to, if you need to not configure it here, name, we can name it, but actually here we need to configure the size, not to be 4 megabyte. He's saying here you need to configure it to be 16 megabyte. Okay, so this is one thing we need to focus on. Okay, this is for the domain profile, and for the private profile and the public profile. Every step we will do, we will repeat it 2 times or 3 times, one for the private, one for the public, one for the domain. Okay, so this is how we can do this from the GUI. So this will be done. Configure the log size. Let's go further, and then we need also to do something for the log to log dropped packets. If there is, we all know that data is transferred using packets or data packets. So we need the Windows Firewall to log if there is any dropped packets. This means if there is dropped packets, this means maybe the connection is interrupted. So we need to log this in the firewall logs. So because this will help us to troubleshoot problems. Okay, so, and audit trail of potential issues. So this is something very, very critical. We need to go there, Windows Defender, and then go to customize, and then to configure the log size, and then to log successful or log dropped packets, yes, and to log successful connections. So maybe if we need to audit or to investigate a connection, a successful connection to a host, we need the firewall to log the successful connections. Okay, so the firewall will log dropped packets if we need to know if there is, or investigate any interruption in the connection between a host and a certain server or a certain service. And to log successful connections, maybe we need to investigate a hacking process. Maybe it is done by passing the firewall, so the hacker have a successful connection to the host. Okay, so the Windows Firewall should log this successful connection, so we can investigate and audit the hacking process. So we need to enable logging of dropped packets and log of successful connections. This will be done, as I said before, in the 3 profiles. Okay, so let's close this, and let's go further again. Let's go further. We go successful connections, and then the same is done inbound connection for the private network. We have done this also. here if you go to the Windows firewall, then private. The same for inbound, we have said this, we need to block, but this is also have some exceptions, and outbound the same, and the same for the public. The same will be done for the public, and the logging will be done for the same for the three. So let's go further here and connect again. Okay, this is outbound, we have said allow outbound connections. Then for the private network we need to do even the log size, we have said this before, and logging of dropped packets on the private profile, logging of successful connections on the private profile. Then we go to the public profile to block inbound connections. There is some exceptions to this. Okay, and then outbound is applied to the public connections. Then here is another thing, this is a new one. Advanced must not to allow not to merge group policy setting. The Windows firewall with advanced local firewall rules must not be merged when group policy setting when connected to a public network. So it's saying here that group policies that are applied within a domain should not interfere with the local group policy of the workstation. A firewall provides a line of defense attack. To be effective, it must be enabled and properly configured. Local firewall laws will not be merged with group policy setting on public network to prevent group policy setting from being changed. So it's saying here there is some firewall setting that are applied using an Active Directory group policy, and there is some setting applied using the local firewall rules. Okay, so this also should not be mixed. So let's see here how we can do this. If we go to customize, let's see how we can do this setting for public or Windows Defender, then public, then we customize, I think, from the behavior here, and then he say that rule merging, allow rules created by local administrators to be merged with rules distributed through group policies. So he's saying here that you can merge two policies, the local policy and the Active Directory group policy. So here we are not doing, we're not allowing this. Okay, not configured. Here we tell him no. Okay, so this will be done for the public. I think this also will be done to the private and the domain, but let me make sure of this. So this should be done. Tell him no, and this can be done using the registry. Okay, go to the registry key and do this. Okay, and let me go further here. Okay, so this will be done for the public. Okay, there is two things actually here. Let me go again here. So if you go to there and go to customize for the public, okay, here allow local rules, okay, not to merge local firewall rules and local connection security rules. So this will be done on the firewall rules and the local connection. Maybe you have some connection or some security rules concerning connections that are configured locally on the firewall, and there is the same but applied through the Active Directory group policy. This also should not be merged. Okay, so this is one thing to allow here to no and no. I think also this will be done for the private and domain, but let me go further and see. If we go there, okay, this is for, let's go for this firewall rules. Okay, firewalls and local connections, and then we can go to the security log size. We have done this before, and drop packets for the public network, and successful connections for the public network, and inbound connections to firewall on domain workstations must only allow authorized remote management host. So this I have said, if you can see here that he is saying that you can allow inbound connections, especially if you are using remote tools to connect to the host. If you have seen my domain inbound rules, okay, we have said that I have exception to remote instruments or remote protocols. So this can be done. So again, I think here, let me revise what I have done here. So here what we will do, we need to first configure the firewall to be on, then to block inbound connections. This will be done here and there. So here we will go and tell him on, and then we will go there and tell him on, okay, and go there and tell him on, okay, and then we will go there and tell him block, okay, but this is not recommended. We will do some exceptions, and again here we will go and tell him block, okay, and then for the public we'll tell him also block, okay, and then we will go there and tell him allow outbounds, which is the default, and allow outbounds, which is the default, and also allow here, which are the default, okay, and then we will configure the logging, okay, the logging to logging size. Here we'll make it 16 megabyte, and then to log dropped packets and log successful connections. This will be done for the domain profile, and this will be also done for the private profile. We will do the same and allow this here and there, okay, and then this also will be done for the public profile. We will go there and do the same, allow the log size, and then do this yes and yes. So this will be done 3 times, and then at the end I think here he's saying we will not do this for the domain profile, so we will not do this for the domain profile or for the private. We will not customize this setting in private or domain. We'll do this only for the public, okay, customize here and then apply these 2 things, okay. I think this can be done for the private and domain anyway, so we'll do this only for the public, okay, and at the end there is some exceptions to allow certain inbound connections to our domain profile, okay. So I think this is the recommendations of the Department of Defense. It is very simple, very short and very clear, and you can do this using the local group policy or the Active Directory group policy, or through the GUI on a standalone workstation, or using the command prompt also on a standalone workstation, okay. Hope this has been informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.